coverage of the GT Cup Championship coming to you from Donington Park, where I think it's just started snowing again. Seriously, I can see the flakes coming down in the sunshine. Unbelievable. Well, we have got our final race of the weekend coming up for you. It's the pit stop. However, before we get to that, here's a reminder of what happened earlier in the sprint.
Lights go out, they head up towards Redgate corner for the first time. Sam Neary already just making sure that he protects that inside line. Lucky Kira trying to get around the outside though at the wheel of his GT3 Lamborghini as they head through Redgate corner. Needs to be careful not to run too wide and open up the door for Michael Igo to squeeze through, but I think Michael Igo has made it. And further down through the order, the battles down towards the midfield have been so intense all weekend. Oh, and that's Ben Dimmock all over the grass at the wheel of the Radical. That surely might have caused a bit of damage to the front splitter. And into the pit lane, I'm afraid to say, comes Michael Igo with a problem. The Lamborghini that had been going so well has had an issue and has had to dive into the pits early. GTH, as we just mentioned, was the number 82 Aston Martin of James Guess, and off, I'm afraid to say, with a rotation has gone James Hillier, who is sharing that Porsche with David Franklin, and that car is beached on the very edge of the gravel, I'm afraid to say, up at McLean's corner. Sam Neary can really get his foot down and open up that advantage once more, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cars, I think, between Sam Neary and the car that's in second position. And that's for the lead of Group GTO. So this is another battle for the lead of the group. I think nearly every group we have a battle in, other than perhaps the lead of Group GT3. So that has allowed the orange Ginetta of Simon Orange to come back under pressure from Craig Wilkins. They are side by side, 3 wide by the look of things. Chris Murphy needs to stay out of harm's way at the wheel of the older Aston Martin. But for Sam Neary, one more car to deal with, should he wish, would be David Holloway's car on the exit of Robert Chicane, and he's going to head over the start-finish line with seconds to go. Does the checker flag come out? Yes, it does. Bang on 0 seconds left as he takes the checker flag.
Some fantastic racing there, and more to come very shortly. Now, during the break between the two races, I did finally manage to catch up with a few of the winners from the sprint race for a little bit of a debrief. Joined now by group and race winner. Hello, Sam Neary. Well done.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's great to be back here and start off the season with a bang, really.
Yeah, I mean, with you and your dad, you're quite a formidable force, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, Rich has just been incredible this weekend. His pace has been mind-blowing, really. He's just gone from strength to strength this weekend and sort of really pulled his weight this weekend. It's really nice to see.
Yeah. And your sprint race today was superb. I mean, you had such a strong lead pretty much throughout the whole thing, didn't you?
Yeah, no, I'm really happy with the pace in the sprint race. I found it was just, in the end, just about managing the gap and managing the tyres. We're going to be reusing these tyres in the endurance race, so really was key to sort of make sure I keep some tyre life for the endurance race later.
How are you finding the changing weather conditions? Because even in the 25 minutes, we were seeing all sorts going on. How was that affecting it?
Yeah, the snow was very interesting. Very interesting. I mean, I've driven with we all call it confidence rain. We all call it confidence rain, and I thought it was just that, because in the car, when it bounces off the windscreen, it just looks like rain, and I went down Craners and it was very slippy. So no, very interesting conditions, but all good because it can happen at any point at any race weekend. So good to sort of learn how to manage the car and manage sort of traffic in those conditions.
Yeah, well, despite those conditions, you still managed to get fastest lap, I believe, as well.
Yeah, no, the team's made an incredible car. The car feels unbelievable, and I can't thank them enough for sort of making the car perfect.
Yeah. So, how are you feeling ahead of our pit stop race, the final race of the weekend?
Yeah, feeling really confident. Rich obviously has really good pace at the start, so if he can pull out a good gap, obviously we're going to be on used tyres, which is a little bit of a hindrance, but I think if I can just manage the gap, hopefully we can get the win this time.
Right, so is it going to be Richard that goes out first?
Yes, Richard that goes out first, tries to pull the gap and then brings it into me, and hopefully comes in at the right time.
Right, well, best of luck and fingers crossed for another win.
Thank you very much.
Well, you can always find Richard Chamberlain very easily, because you just look for the orange Porsche, the number 5. Well done. That must have been nice. winner for the GTO.
Well, thank you very much indeed. It's a lot of hard work. And we haven't raced the car really since, well, only once last year, I think. And we've done a lot of work on it, and it's not ready yet. We're not finished with it, but it's been great to be out here racing. And yeah, I've loved it. I'm behind the car at the moment. I need to up my game. It's just so fast around here. It's crazy.
Yeah. So how's it been sort of getting back to racing really after the break and all the, you know, the changes and the weirdness that there's been over the last year?
Well, my opinion is that we have COVID. It's a real thing. You can't ignore it. But once you're vaccinated, that's your life. And we're not going to get any better than that. So long as we're careful, this is as good as it's going to get.
Yeah.
And I can't wait. I haven't got that many more years, so I want to go racing.
Don't say that, Richard, don't say that. So how was the actual sprint race for you today? Obviously there was racing yesterday, but specifically the race that we had earlier. How did that go?
This morning. Well, not so bad. The car's got a lot of understeer in it. Lots and lots of understeer. And it was damaged yesterday. The rear diffuser was damaged yesterday, so we had to run without a rear diffuser. So the amount of downforce we lost was quite significant. So I couldn't really keep up with the cars in front. It was very hard work, but nevertheless, it was great, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, you still got your group win. How are you feeling looking ahead towards the pit stop this afternoon?
Well, 50 minutes, anything can happen, can't it? I'm doing it obviously on my own. Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be really good.
Yeah. What do you reckon about the weather? Because we've had some snow. Sun's out now. What do you think?
Well, it's sunny now, so I suspect it will snow in the race.
Sort your tyres out.
Yeah, quite. We'll put different ones on each corner. That'll be fine.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Now, unfortunately, since speaking to Richard, he has had to retire from this race, so we won't be seeing that distinctive orange Porsche number 5 of Richard Chamberlain, sadly. And there have actually been a few other cars that have retired from this race. So, with details of that and all the other updates about the upcoming race, I'll hand you back over to Mark.
Thanks a lot, Michelle. Yeah, good to hear from some of the drivers there. And yeah, such a shame that we will not see that orange Porsche, as Michelle just mentioned, on the grid for this final race of the weekend for the GT Cup Championship. But yes, it's not just Richard that has had to retire his Porsche. There are other cars that unfortunately, for various reasons, have had to retire following the sprint race earlier on today. We will not be seeing the number 247 Simon Green Motorsport Lamborghini Huracan of Lucky Kira out. Work commitments means that he has had to dash away from the circuit and deal with more important things, more fundamental things than racing. So he is out. We've also had the number 55 JMH Automotive Lamborghini Huracan that John Seal was scheduled to have shared with Abby Eaton in this race, but he was involved in an incident, I think, with Richard Chamberlain earlier, and as a result of that, John Seal's car suffered some damage as it made contact with circuit furniture. So that has prevented his inclusion in this race. We have unfortunately also lost the number 52 Deranged Motorsport Aston Martin Vantage GT4 that Matthew Lewis was scheduled to have shared with Ollie Brown. That retired very early on in the sprint race earlier. It was a suspension failure on that car that they do not have sufficient parts or time or combination of the two to repair that before this race. And other cars that we had issues with in the other race earlier on the sprint race have been able to make it out. The number 18, if you were watching the stream earlier on, you might have seen that the number 18 WPI Lamborghini Huracan of Michael Igo came into the pit lane, was pushed back into the garage, came back out and did one lap later on in the race to see if they'd sorted the problem, and then came back into retirement. That was a damper issue with the car, so that was their problem with that car. We also saw retire from the race earlier on Charlotte Gilbert. She parked up the Marcus Mantis, generally just wasn't happy with the race as a whole, so she opted to just park the car up. And we also saw the number 17 car puffing out what looked like a bit of tyre rub on the car from the left-hand side of the bonnet of the Orange Racing powered by JMH Automotive Ginetta of Russ Lindsay and Patrick Collins. Well, that was actually smoke. It was an oil cooler. A stone had flicked up and had damaged the oil cooler, but thankfully, despite the fact it was spewing out a little bit of oil, the car was parked up before it caused any permanent damage. So we should see them head onto the grid for this pit stop race that is coming up. Now, we heard earlier on when Michelle was talking to Sam Neary, Sam allude to the fact that he is going to be running himself and his father in this race with the car that will start from pole position with used tyres in this race. And that's a good point that he made there, because all of the cars run a Control Pirelli slick tyre, and they are all restricted to three sets of slick tyres over the course of a weekend. So they have clearly used all of their new sets over the course of the 3 races that we've had previously, so they are probably not the only ones that are going to have to come out now on a used set of slick tyres in these conditions, which a few moments ago from down in the pit lane you could see in the background that it looked rather dark in the skies above. All of a sudden the lux level has sort of gone up a little bit, and it looks slightly more promising now. There's almost some blue sky outside the commentary box. Those black clouds are starting to move away from the circuit, albeit very slowly, because there's only a very light gust of wind. Now, as this is the pit stop race, there are a few other things that we need to tell you. New to the regulations for this year is that there are 2 pit stop windows. So depending on which group your car races in, that dictates when the pit window opens for you. It is a 50-minute race, and therefore, for the cars that race in either Group GTB, Group GTH and Group GTA, for the Sunday pit stop race, which is today, they will enter the pit lane Group 2. Let's have a quick look. Group 2 will enter on the Sunday pit stop rate between the 24th and 29th minute of the race, whereas the cars that run in Group GTO, Group GT3 and Group GTC will enter the pit stop between the 29th and the 35th minute of the race. So they will have a later pit stop than the cars that run in the less powerful groups. Now, that's done really this year for safety reasons. With the size of entry list that we have got, it means that if all of the cars descended onto the pit lane at the same time, it would be very, very busy indeed, and therefore for safety reasons the organisers and championship coordinators have decided to write into the regulations that there are 2 pit stop windows that need dealing with. Cars now starting to nose their way out of the pit lane. That is the number 28 Ferrari 488 that Paul Bailey shares with Ross Wiley. Ross Wiley is a former British GT champion, secured that in the GT4 category some years ago, but you can see already, we've not got that many cars in the pit lane, just how busy it looks already. We've also got in this race success seconds that we need to worry about. Now, the success seconds are to try and stop any single car dominating over the course of a weekend, or the endurance pit stop races generally throughout the course of the season. So in yesterday's race, any car that won its group is handed additional time penalties in the pits. Now, all of the cars have to conduct a pit stop of 60 seconds, so the car has to remain stationary for 60 seconds. To drive from one end of the pit lane to the other at the pit lane speed limit takes a further 15 seconds. So there's a loop on pit lane in, there's a loop on pit lane out. If you've got no success seconds from in to out with a driver change, should be 75 seconds. If you're less than that, you've either sped in the pit lane or you've stopped for not the sufficient period of time, and a penalty will be coming your way. For anybody that was either in the top 3 in their group yesterday, they then get the success seconds. So if you won your group, you get an extra 20 success seconds where the car remains stationary in the pits. If you finish second in your group, it's an extra 15 success seconds. And if you finished third in your group, it's an extra 10 success seconds. So whilst the cars are working their way out, ready to come out, I'm just going to go through the success seconds with you, because it's a big grid that we need to get through when they're on their rolling lap. So let's cover off the success seconds now. So grid order, car that's on pole, no success seconds, that will be the number 88 Mercedes. The car alongside, the number 18 Lamborghini, an extra 20 seconds that's in the pits. The second row of the grid, there will be 10 success seconds for the number 4 Triple M Motorsport TechServe Nissan that you see. They're third on the grid, and alongside an extra 15 seconds will be the Balf Motorsport number 36 car. Will bring you starting drivers when the cars are on their formation lap. The third row of the grid, it will be an extra 15 seconds for Raw Motorsport, and alongside will be the Scott Sport Lamborghini. No additional success seconds for that one. And then the fourth row of the grid is number 9 Top Cats Racing, an extra 15 seconds on the grid for that one. And sitting alongside will be the number 28 Ferrari. That will have an extra 10 seconds in the pit lane. The fifth row of the grid, number 96, the Stanbridge Motorsport Lamborghini, an extra 15 seconds, and alongside will be the number 67 Orange Racing powered by JMH Automotive Ginetta. That will have an extra 20 seconds on the grid. The next row of the grid is going to be row number 6, and neither the 24/7 Motorsport or Faluga cars have any time penalties, so we'll quickly move on to the next row of the grid, which is row number 7, and therefore the Make It Happen Ginetta 0 success seconds to spend in the pits, but the car team from Team Hard that sits alongside will have an extra 20 seconds. As we move on to row number 8, number 80 Scott Sports car will have an extra 15 seconds on the grid alongside Feathers Motorsport. They're off scratch, no additional time penalties. And row 9 of the grid, Stanbridge Motorsport, an extra 10 seconds on the grid. Alongside will be 26, which is Paddock Motorsport. They will have an extra 15 seconds. The next row of the grid is number 50 Valuga Motorsport car, no additional time penalties for that, and neither does the number 66 car from Enduro Motorsport. Before we move on to row number 11, number 17 car from Orange Racing powered by JMH, no additional time penalties, but the car alongside, the sister car to it, the number 1 car, has an extra 20 seconds to spend in the pit lane area. Onto the 12th row of the grid, the number 44 car, Signature RV, no additional time penalties, but the number 29 car from Gemini Motorsport alongside has an extra 15 penalty, an extra 15. The next row of the grid, which is Fox Motorsport, no additional time penalties for that, neither does Century Motorsport. Before we move on to row number 14, and there's no time penalty for Greystone GT. The Whitebridge Motorsport car has an extra 10 seconds to spend in the pit lane, and then there's just 2 more cars that we need to pick up on that have additional time penalties. The number 90 Balf Motorsport car on row 15, an extra 10 seconds to spend in the pit lane, and the only other car is at the very tail end of the grid, Century Motorsport. That car will have an extra 10 seconds to spend in the pit lane. That guides you through all the success seconds, which gives me a bit more time on the formation lap to quickly rattle through the starting drivers that we will have. We might be able to bring the grid back up again and give you the starting drivers for those, but in the meantime, cars are threading their way down in towards the grid area. The Mercedes of Team ABBA will sit on pole position alongside the Lamborghini. Such variety. We have Mercedes and a Lamborghini on row number 2, and Nissan and a McLaren on row number 3, a Radical and a Lamborghini on row number 4, and a Lamborghini and a Ferrari on row number 5, I think it will be. So it's enormous amounts of variety that we have in the GT Cup Championship. We can already see that the Radical for Raw Motorsport, the black car there to the left of your screens, is in position. Great to see that Radical RXC out. We saw it racing in another UK Championship last year, but it's wonderful that both Ben Dimmock and Steve Burgess have moved over to the GT Cup Championship this year. It's the first time we've had a Radical on the grid. So with cars heading onto the grid, it's time to hand you back downstairs to Michelle, who can sort of build us up to this race and maybe chat to 1 or 2 of the drivers.
Thanks, Mark. Yes, I am down here on the grid for the final time as the cars start to line up. In actual fact, we're waiting for our pole position here. Sam Neary standing by because he's not driving just yet. Are you waiting for?
Waiting for Richard.
Exactly.
Here he is right now.
He's coming. Yeah. Let's see. Here he comes, waving him in. Right down the centre here. Taking pole position. Fantastic. There we go, the car number 88, the Mercedes. Superb. On pole position once again for this second race of the Sunday in the GT3 group. Now, just next to it, we have, actually in this race, don't forget, you've got the AM Pro combinations being the pit stop race. And this is one of them here. You've got Michael Igo alongside Keane. So Michael's in there at the moment getting ready, and then there'll be the switch over at one of the pit stops. And Mark was explaining how there are 2 different pit stop times just because of the sheer number of cars. We've actually got 33 cars lined up now. Obviously a few cars that we've lost since the sprint race. If you just come with me, Ben the cameraman, follow me back. Hello! Caught on camera. Here we go, we have got the Proctors, which is another father and son combo in the number 36 on the second row. And then just over here we have got the car of Graham Tilley, number 4. And then finally, going back onto this third row, we have got Mr. Burgess, who I believe, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but is it him who is the local, one of our local drivers from Nottingham, I believe.
Absolutely, yes, Steve Burgess, local chap, born in Leicester, lives in Nottingham, Michelle.
Yeah, which is lovely. So obviously Donington Park is his local, so that's really good. Lovely to see him here. And then we've got the number 6 just next to him of Dylan and Quave. So do you know what? The sirens are going off. I think it's probably high time that I remove myself from the grid. So Mark, I'll hand back over to you and you can explain the rest of our fabulous grid for this pit stop race.
Thanks a lot, Michelle. So sun shining down there, but you can still see the grey clouds in the distance, which are moving away, thankfully. So let's hope over the course of this 50 minutes that we don't end up with, well, as we saw earlier on, a mixture of sunshine at some parts of the circuit, but bizarrely, snow at other parts of the circuit.
Inside information, 911 had to go in the pit lane because somebody put the wrong wheels on.
We will await the cars ready to line up and roll off onto their formation lap, which will be happening very, very shortly indeed. As for starting drivers, well, there in the pit lane is the car of David Franklin. Now, that was scheduled to have started in 12th position. Now, the grid for this race is done as per the fastest lap times from the sprint race earlier on. Well, it was James Hillary that was racing that car in the sprint race. David Franklin is not as quick as James. David is the car owner, but I suspect he's gone into the pit lane purely because the car was starting in quite a high position and David will just want to stay out of trouble, I would have thought. That's no disrespect to David's speed. He's quicker than I would ever be in that thing, but I suspect that's probably a decision that's been made purely just to make sure they start from the pit lane, try and stay out of trouble and work their way up on the grid. So as for starting drivers then, car number 88 started by Richard Neary on pole position. Alongside is a number 18 Lamborghini that will be started by Michael Igoe. Remember, the pros cannot start in this race. It has to be the amateur drivers that start where there's a pro-am combination. Row 2 of the grid is Graham Tilley, who will give way to Will Tregerth at the pro later on, and alongside is number 36 Stuart Proctor, who will give way to his son Lewis Proctor. Row 3 of the grid, Steve Burgess starts. They're both am drivers, so they can decide as to which one wants to start. Alongside is John Dillon. He'll hand over to the pro Phil Quay for part 2 of the race. And the row 4 of the grid, again, it's another am combination. Warren Gilbert has been selected to start alongside Paul Bailey, who will hand over to the pro Ross Wiley, who we've seen regularly racing in the Porsche Carrera Cup GB over the course of the last few years. On to the next row of the grid. That is where we see number 96. That will be started by Chris Kemp, because again Stuart Hall is the pro and can't take part. And alongside is number 67. That is the reigning overall champion. Simon Orange was partnered with Josh Jackson last year in the races this year. They are swapping cars over the weekend. Simon raced the McLaren yesterday. He's racing the Ginetta today, and he's going the full distance on his own. So looking forward to seeing how he gets on. And then row number 6 of the grid is should have been the number 911 car. We know that will start from the pit lane alongside the number 35 car, which is Nick Phelps, who will go all on his own. As for the pole sitters in their group, the leading car on the grid in GT3 is the pole sitter Richard Neary. The leading car in group GTO is the black Radical in the hands of Steve Burgess. The leading car in GTB is the Top Cats Racing Lamborghini, the number 9 car. The leading car in GTC on the grid is the number 96 Chris Kemp driven Lamborghini, and then we move on to the leading car in Group GTA is going to be Simon Orange, the number 67 Ginetta, and the leading car in Group GTH will be the number 82 Aston Martin in the hands of James Guest. So they are our group pole sitters, you could argue. The final formation lap is ready to go. We've got those 2 pit stop windows that we need to consider, the first of which will open between the 24th and 29th minute of the race, the second of which is between the 29th and the 35th minute of the race for the cars in the quicker groups. So for the final time today, we're about to go racing in the GT Cup Championship. Round 4 of the 2021 season gets underway at Donington Park with Richard Neary and Michael Igoe no doubt going side by side up towards Redgate Corner. Richard Neary has the nose of the Mercedes ahead of the Lamborghini. Graham Tilley slots through into 3rd position. Steve Burgess going side by side with Stuart Proctor and should come out in 4th place at Hollywood. In fact, I think Stuart Proctor might have dropped down through the order, and that's a spin, I'm afraid to say, very early on in the race for Russ Lindsay, rotating the Orange Racing powered by JMH Ginetta. That's the car that had the oil cooler issue in the race earlier on. They were hoping for better things after the problems with that oil cooler issue, but sadly the spin in the early stages will drop him right the way towards the back of the pack. So race leaders are already heading out of McLean's corner, starting to propel themselves up towards Coppice corner. Stuart Proctor, I think, has dropped down to 6th position, so I think John Dillon has been able to go through at the wheel of the number 61 Lamborghini, but much quicker coming out of Coppers is Michael Igoe, who's trying to get a run on Richard Neary. Richard Neary just protecting that all-important inside line. You can see the nose of the car dip as he dives onto the brake. These GT3 cars are so good on the brakes, and as they accelerate their way over the start-finish line to conclude the first lap of the race, Richard Neary is not under any pressure this time through as they head up towards Redgate Corner. So it's still Mercedes from Lamborghini, Nissan from John Dillon's Lamborghini, who's got through in ahead of Steve Burgess, so the Group GTO Radical drops down a position there, but still leads its group at this stage. It's a leading car in Group GTO, albeit it's now down into 5th position rather than the 4th that it had been occupying. So down through the old hairpin. Richard Neary already having claimed a win in yesterday's sprint race. His son Sam having claimed a win in the sprint race earlier on today. They were on for a good result in yesterday's pit stop race, but there was a safety car just as the pit window opened, and whereas everybody else dived into the pit lane just as the safety car was coming out, the decision taken by the team was to pit that car just as the safety car was going in, which is not the most efficient way of doing it, and therefore that sort of compromised their run in yesterday's pit stop race, where they came through to finish in 7th place overall, which put them 5th in the GT3 category. So in towards the Roberts chicane. Lap number 2 is about to be completed. The lead gap after one lap was just under half a second. This time as they go over the start-finish line, it comes down to 0.3 of a second as Michael Igoe on the first of the flying laps sets the fastest lap of the race so far, 1 minute 6.387. Richard Neary will hand over to son Sam, whereas Michael Igoe will hand over to former Sunoco Challenge winner and 3 times runner-up in the British GT Championship, Lamborghini factory driver Phil Keane for part 2 of the race. There is Craig Wilkins at the wheel of the number 80 Scott Sport Ginetta. He's been going well in Group GTA so far this season. We just saw him heading through Redgate Corner. Look at the battles further back again. A bit like we've seen earlier on, battles are going to be top to bottom in the field. Traffic management for the quicker cars is going to be absolutely crucial again over the course of this race. Just picking your moment when you're going to try and work your way through and past the slower cars. There goes Josh Jackson. He's driving the number 1 McLaren in this race. He's lying 6th in Group GTH at the moment, but it's a big chunk of GTH cars that sit ahead of him at this stage, not least of which is the number 44 car, which is going to be started in this race by Steve Ruston, former champion. Steve Ruston and John Whitehouse claimed this championship back in 2019, and just ahead of them is that number 82 Aston Martin in the hands of James Guest, the white and blue car with its day-glow orange flashes, that's trying to get a run here and try to sneak its way through and up the inside of Steve Walton. Easily goes through on the brakes in towards Roberts chicane, so place gained for James Guest. That should put him up into now 17th position, but it doesn't improve his position in the group. He will still remain 3rd in Group GTH. Down the straight and in towards braking area for Redgate Corner. Steve Ruston now trying to pick off Steve Walton. The signature RV McLaren dives up the inside of the Make It Happen Ginetta. That then runs a little bit wide, which opens up the door for Josh Jackson to try and squeeze his way through, which he manages to do at the wheel of the orange McLaren. And then the next of the cars that's going to try and pick off that black and yellow Ginetta is going to be Morgan Tilbrook at the wheel of the GT4 specification Mercedes. So that runs in Group GTH. If you weren't with us earlier on for the groups, Group GT3 is for GT3 homologated cars, Group GTO is for open specification cars, so that's anything that's been highly modified or short-run production models of cars, or anything that's been developed like Richard Chamberlain's orange Porsche that sadly isn't with us. Group GTC is for challenge spec cars, so Ferrari Challenge Europe cars and Lamborghini Super Trofeo cars, but they balance them all in terms of performance. Group GTB is for challenge cars, but earlier spec cars and for big modified saloons. Group GTH is for GT4 cars, and Group GTA is for things like Ginetta Super Cup cars largely, which is what we've got out this weekend. That's a quick guide through the groups, and the corner colours of the sun strips tells you the groups that they are in. So for instance, orange in the corner is a Group GTA car, red in the corners heading towards us are Group GTH cars. That's the way that you can pick them out, and same different colorations that we see for all the rest of the groups as well. And Tilbrook could not get his way through and past the Make It Happen Racing Ginetta of Stephen Walton. Morgan Tilbrook, come the pit stop window, is going to be on scratch, no additional time penalties to worry about. Now the good thing for Richard Neary is at the moment that he is, come the pit stop window, going to have no additional time penalty to spend in the pits. The Lamborghini in the hands of Michael Igoe that's hunting him down, when Michael hands over to Phil Keane is going to lose 20 seconds in the pits because they've got to remain stationary for longer following their win in the pit stop race yesterday. The it's traffic that they're about to head up towards before too much longer. Michael Igoe with another new fastest lap of the race, a 1 minute 5.883, 1 minute 5.883. Now that is only about 1.3 seconds shy of the time that Phil Keane did in the pit stop race yesterday. Phil is the pro driver. Michael's only been racing for 3 years, but has come on so well. He's always been quick, and is he going to have a look for the lead of the race? No, he's almost pushing Richard Neary round through McLean's corner. Up towards Redgate corner, we see another bundle of cars coming up. That is the number 34 Porsche, which is Richard Marsh, just ahead of the number 26 Tom Rawlings Paddock Motorsport driven McLaren. So that's a Group GTB Porsche ahead of a Group GTH McLaren. And then just off the back of that is the Group GTA Ginetta in the hands of Craig Wilkins, who will hand over to the pro driver Aaron Scott for part 2 of the race. So that's another good little squabble that we've got going on there. And what position is that for? That's for 13th, 14th and 15th places. So, as we've seen with, well, even for this race, with 33 cars on the grid, it's still a very busy Donington Park National Circuit. Can Craig Wilkins get the overlap at Coppice? No, not quite. Now that Tom Rawlings' attentions in the McLaren are turned to the Ginetta that sits behind, it's just allowing Richard Marsh to pull away a little bit. Richard Marsh ideally wants to catch that Porsche ahead. Off has gone Steve Burgess, I'm afraid. So that's at Redgate corner through the gravel. We saw a similar problem for that Radical yesterday up at Redgate corner, where it took a trip through the gravel. And, well, it got away with it yesterday as well. So through Coppice corner for our race leaders. They are now on lap number 7 of the race. Pit window is a while away from opening yet. We don't need to worry about that because we're only, 8 minutes into the race. Richard Neary still under pressure, still just 0.4 of a second at the start of the lap between himself and the Lamborghini, the WPI Motorsport Lamborghini, in the hands of Michael Igoe, who is pushing as hard as he possibly can. More traffic up the road will be the Gemini Motorsport Marcos Mantis of Andy Roby. We've seen Andy racing BMW 3 Series with us in the past, but it's a Marcos Mantis that he's appeared in this weekend, and has had, well, a few little troubles with the car over the weekend. He's going to move harmlessly out of the way, allow the race leaders to squeeze their way through there, and no real time lost for either. So Richard Neary did not gain any advantage through the traffic. Now the lead battle for GTB is a bit like the sprint race earlier on, when we saw the two Porsches nose to tail for most of it. Richard Marsh, former British touring car racer, moving around and behind Nick Phelps, who is still hanging on to the lead advantage in Group GTB, but only just at this stage. Now, I've got to say, I have been hugely impressed with Nick Phelps over the course of this weekend. The 52-year-old from Berkhamsted joining the GT Cup for the first time. He must be the tallest driver in the field. He's 6'8", is Nick Phelps. And this weekend is his first ever race weekend. And at the moment, he is ahead of Richard Marsh at the wheel of the Porsche that sits behind the Team Hard prepared Porsche. And Richard Marsh did, 3 years of British Touring Car Championship, 4 years was it, between 2003 and 2007. Did a season in the GT Cup. He's raced in the Porsche Carrera Cup in the past as well. He was runner-up in the Kumo BMW Championship many years ago as well, was Richard Marsh. But for Nick Phelps in his first weekend of racing to be ahead of a driver with that kind of experience just goes to show how good Nick has been already. And surely this is a great weekend for him to be able to build on. So those two cars just heading out of Coppice corner. Craig Wilkins is trying to hunt them down. Craig sits in 14th position. Now, has Richard Marsh got a run this time on Nick Phelps? Yes, he has. Nick tries to squeeze him as much as he dare. The two just turn in towards Roberts, absolutely together. Hardly any daylight between the pair of them, but fair and hard racing from both. Now, they're both just starting to hold each other up, so it's bringing the number 80 Ginetta of Craig Wilkins into the mix. He lies second in Group GTA, as now Richard Marsh dives up the inside of Nick Phelps, takes the place away, moves himself up into 12th position, and puts himself into the lead of Group GTB. Now Richard Marsh will hand the car over to Sam Randon for part 2 of the race. Nick Phelps will remain behind the wheel. He is driving solo over the course of this weekend. So shuffle in the order there. And now for Nick Phelps, ideally what he wants to do is hang on to the coattails of the car he's just lost the place to, but equally as much he'll realise that he's coming under pressure from the car behind, which is the number 80 Ginetta in the hands of the man from the West Midlands, Craig Wilkins. Craig almost getting the overlap there. Raced in the Porsche Club Championship for the last few years as Craig, but we've also seen him out racing in the British GT Championship, not least of which in big Dodge Vipers some years ago. And through he goes, past Nick Phelps. Place gained for Craig Wilkins, but again, that's a Group GTA car getting past a Group GTB car, which in a straight line is a little bit quicker, so Nick Phelps is going to return the favour, I think. Yeah, there he goes, and dives straight past Craig Wilkins, who's going to be a bit quicker through the Robert chicane and therefore might have another little nibble as they head down the start-finish straight. Tom Rawlings in the Group GTH. McLaren's trying to get involved as well, and he drives himself alongside drivers left of Craig Wilkins. So great fight going on. 3 different groups that they are in. Group GTB for the Porsche, Group GTA for the Ginetta, and Group GTH for the McLaren, but there's no let-up in the squabble that's going on for what is 13th, 14th and 15th positions. Now, the difficulty is here for the car that's at the back of this train, that's Tom Rawlings. Well, he is leading the Group GTH charge at this stage, but because he's bottled up behind Porsche and Ginetta, he's getting caught by the car that is running second in Group GTH. So just keep your eye on the Aston Martin that's in the distance. Craig Wilkins this time gets the overlap. Oh, there's contact between Craig Wilkins and Nick Phelps. Nick Phelps gets bumped into the barriers there as the two of them made contact, both fighting for the same bit of tarmac, and well, something had to give there. And with that contact having been made, Craig Wilkins might have got away with that. Certainly Nick Phelps did not. And he is surely going to be out of the race there on the approach towards Coppice Corner, with the car parked up on the inside, following the contact with the barriers. Richard Neary still threading his way through the traffic. That's a number 50 car of Carl Cavers that he's just gone through and passed. Carl sharing that car with Lewis Plato over the course of this weekend. Lewis, another former Sunoco Challenge winner, and a driver who we've also seen doing good things in the Porsche Carrera Cup GB for the last few years. Next to the cars he's going to go through and past is the car that's second in Group GTH, which is James Guess at the wheel of number 82 Aston Martin. Then he'll thread his way through and past Craig Wilkins in the Ginetta, who fires it up the inside of the number 17 Ginetta, I think that is. Yeah, through and past the number 17 Ginetta of Russ Lindsay, who had that spin on the very first lap of the race up at Redgate Corner. So Craig Wilkins looks to have sort of got away with the contact or whatever happened between himself and Nick Phelps, where the two of them brushed against each other, and Nick Phelps' car, I suspect, yeah, is still parked up there, isn't it, on the grass on the approach in towards Coppice Corner. So through the Robert chicane, this is David Franklin, the car that started from the pit lane, the number 911 Porsche. He is just getting passed by the car that leads Group GTA, which is going to be Simon Orange, the number 67 car. Simon setting up his own team for this year, became the overall champion with Josh Jackson last year when they were racing for Team Hard. They've invested in their cars, they've built their own team, they've bought all of the equipment, as we were hearing earlier on, and so far it's been I would say a solid weekend for the team, certainly for the two orange coloured cars from Orange Racing. Josh Jackson and Simon Orange picking up where they left off, rather, with group wins over the course of this weekend. Number 15, David Holloway, he will be coming under pressure from Mike Price, another former Porsche racer. Those two are fighting for 20th and 21st position, and both scheduled to hand over to very handy drivers indeed. The number 15 Aston Martin will be handed over to former British GT champion Bradley Ellis, and for Mike Price, he will be handing over to former British GT racer and Blancpain racer Callum MacLeod for part 2 of the race, both of whom are very rapid pros indeed, with huge amounts of experience. So through McLean's Corner, there goes number 118, which is the Fox Motorsport car. That was started by James Townsend. He's sort of trying to catch up with other cars, and also conscious that he's being lapped as well by cars that are picking their way through and past him. Through has gone the 4th place Lamborghini, John Dillon, the blue car with the Dayglow green flashes, and he needs to press on because the number 36 McLaren of Stuart Proctor is bearing down as well. As they headed towards the Robert chicane, he's managed to get 2 back markers between himself and that McLaren. That could prove critical. So 35 minutes of the race to go. So there's a while yet before we see the pit window open. It's going to be about 9 minutes, isn't it, before we start to see the pit window open. Open to the 24th minute of the race. Can Mike Price get the overlap on David Holloway this time? Looks as though on towards the top of Hollywood, the McLaren is side by side with the Aston Martin, just as they get towards the yellow flag zone there by the look of things. Now, I saw a waved yellow flag there. I saw, well, not quite sure whether Mike Price got it done before the yellow flag, but I think behind there was probably a car that didn't quite pick up on the yellow flag there and was able to gain position, whilst potentially we've got safety car coming out. So I'm not quite sure why the safety car will be coming out. Now, it could be because Nick Phelps' car maybe they've decided just needs moving out of harm's way, or it could be that something else has expired out on circuit, and therefore that's why we are having the issue. So safety car comes out, it will pick up the race leader. Now the only car that I don't think is circulating anymore is Nick Phelps, so I think everybody else is largely accounted for. So I think it could well be for that Porsche, which is why we're seeing the safety car. So it might just have taken race control a lap or two to evaluate how vulnerable that car is. It's certainly got some front left suspension that's damaged on it, hasn't it? You can see the angle of camber there is certainly not correct. So for Nick Phelps, what had been a solid weekend of racing has ended with a bit of disappointment for him, but either way, what a first weekend of racing, to have the pace that he's had throughout the course of this weekend, almost having to bend double at 6'8" to get himself inside the Porsche in the first place, and has been on the money, I would say, all weekend. So 33 minutes of the scheduled 50 to go. We should be able to clear this incident before we take the clock down to 26 minutes remaining. So I think that will be the point at which we have our first pit window open. And again, just to clarify that, the reason we have 2 pit windows is because with 38 cars originally on the grid for this weekend. Right, there's Charlotte Gilbert. Now that could be the reason. Charlotte, right, damaged suspension on her car as well. Charlotte's had a tough old weekend, I would afraid to say. So she retired earlier on because just issues in the race she wasn't happy with. She's had a couple of trips to the gravel trap in a mixture of free practice and the race, but has now got damage on the car, and that is a difficult end to the weekend for her. Top Cats Racing have done well with their GTC specification Lamborghini, but for the sister car to it in the team, for Charlotte Gilbert, back for her second full season of GT Cup, it's very disappointing to end the weekend with some damage. So she's, I think, trying to limp the car back to the pit lane, which would be a sensible thing to do if she can do it, but not ideal if you've probably not quite got sufficient steering on that car with the damage that she's had inflicted on it for whatever reason. So what we will do is, while the safety car is out there, let's just guide you through the top 10 and pick out the group leaders at this stage. So leading the race with just under 32 minutes to go, it's the number 88 Mercedes in the hands of Richard Neary. Second in the race is the number 18 Lamborghini of Michael Igo. Third is number 4, which is Graham Tilley in the Nissan. And fourth is number 61, which is John Dillon in his Lamborghini. Fifth is 36, which is the McLaren 750S in the hands of Stuart Proctor. Now, all of those cars are in the GT3 category, so Group GT3 for all of them, which means in 6th place, that's where we have our class leader for Group GTO, the number 7 Radical RXC, which is Steve Burgess behind the wheel. So that's the Group GTO leader. In 7th place, it's number 9, which is the Group GTC leading Lamborghini in the hands of Warren Gilbert. The reason we've got Lamborghinis in GT3 and Lamborghinis in GTC, if you're wondering why, well, the Lamborghini in GT3 category is a pure GT3 car. The Lamborghini in the GTC category will have come out of something like the Lamborghini Super Trofeo 1 make series. So not as good at aero, but actually a little bit more power. And because the aero isn't as good, it's slightly quicker in a straight line. It's a strange thing, but entirely different specification of car. In 8th place is number 28, that's the Ferrari of Paul Bailey. 9th place is 41, which is the Lamborghini of James Simons and Fraser Smart. I think it was Fraser that was scheduled to start that, indeed it was. And then completing the top 10 is our Group GTA leader, which is going to be number 67, the Ginetta in the hands of Simon Orange. So that gives you the top 10. Other group leaders that are outside of the top 10. Leading Group GTB in 12th place is the Porsche of Richard Marsh. Leading Group GTH in 13th place is Tom Rawlings at the wheel of the number 26 McLaren. And that should now give you all of the group leaders. We can see drivers are poised and ready to go. That is going to be the car of James Kellett. So that's James Kellett, who is scheduled to get over and get on board the number 6 Century Motorsport Ginetta. James is a pro. He is a driver who has cut his teeth in Ginettas, really, has James Kellett. So it's the number 6 Century Motorsport car that he will get on board from. He's a 2 times Ginetta GT5 champion. He claimed that championship back in 2018 and 2015 as well. He was also the champion in the Ginetta Junior Winter Series as well back in 2013. And if you add to that his karting title as well, he's a 4 times British champion. He took the KF3 Kartmasters GP title back in 2012. There's another former champion as well. That is Marcus Clutton, who is poised and ready to jump on board the Group GTH Mercedes that he shares with Morgan Tilbrook. Now, as for Marcus Clutton, again, a very, very quick, very adaptable driver. He was the Radical Challenge champion last year. He was the British GT4 champion back in 2011 and was the British GT Supersport Championship when that class existed back in 2009, the 32-year-old who now helps run that team as well. So he helps run enduro racing. He's got a busy season ahead of himself with lots of racing with Morgan Tilbrook in this, and they'll be racing the British GT Championship and other things as well, things like Fun Cup as well. I think he'll be racing with Morgan Tilbrook in, so he's got a busy season of racing as a pro driver, all with the same customer as well. So safety car out. Now there's only 2 minutes and 40 seconds to go until the pit window opens, if I've got my maths right, so 26 seconds remaining will be the 24th minute of the race, if that makes sense. So between the 24th and 29th minute of the race is the pit window that opens for Group 2, and that's when we'll see the Group GTB, Group GTH and Group GTA cars be able to head to the pit lane. So between 26 and 21 minutes remaining on the countdown clock that's on your screens, that will be. Now the reason that they come into the pit lane first is because they came into the pit lane second yesterday, so it swaps around each time. So on the Saturday race meeting, it's the more powerful cars that pit first and the slower cars pit second. They swap it round on day 2 of a 2-day weekend race meeting, so it evens it out really, so that the pro drivers either get longer one day and less the next, and vice versa. It evens out the driving time over the course of a weekend. And with the safety car doing another lap, that lap that was done by the safety car was just over 2 minutes behind the safety car. Well, next time when they come round, then there will be less than 26 minutes remaining on the clock, which means the pit window will be open. So you're going to see the cars with the orange and the red windscreen headers head in towards the pit lane, and also the cars that run in Group GTB will be able to head towards the pit lane. That will be the cars with the purple windscreen headers that can head into the pit lane as well. So that will be the batches of cars that we'll see filing their way in. Are we going to see that car come in? Because it's important for, ideally, Simon Orange to try and hang on to the lead of Group GTA, that number 67 Ginetta, who is right the way towards the tail end of the field. But I suspect if the teams have got this right, what you need to do is come in immediately. Now, if the safety car turns its lights off this time through, and everybody dives into the pit lane, you might be better just to stay out for one further lap and then come in, because the pit lane will be very slightly quieter. Remember, we've got the success seconds to worry about as well, so we're talking about that number 67 Ginetta of Simon Orange that leads Group GTA. Well, that car's got an extra 20 seconds to spend in the pit lane compared to some others, so it's going to be a tough call as to whether they can get that done and get the car back out again. We are going to go green at the end of this lap as well, so it is up to Richard Neary as to when he wants to get things going. The safety car accelerates away. Richard Neary will just hold his pace, and then he decides when he wants to get his foot down and go, and it's probably going to be right on the approach in towards the Robert chicane about now. Yep, so there he goes, gets his foot down because he knows he's going to be as quick as he can through the Robert chicane, and starts to accelerate his way on towards the start-finish line. Now, how many cars are going to peel their way into the pit lane? Craig Wilkins is coming in. It looks as though David Frankland is destined for the pit lane. James Guess is in as well. Simon Orange, Josh Jackson come in. Steve Rushton is in. Mike Price is in. Yet everybody, almost everybody without exception in Group GTB, Group GTH and Group GTA dive their way into a hugely busy pit lane. And this is key as to why this year they have split the pit stops into 2 windows, because you can imagine if every car came into the pit lane in one go, just how busy it would be, and therefore how dangerous it would be for drivers, for mechanics, for marshals, for any members of the media that are down there as well. So it's a busy pit lane as is, without these cars from the likes of GT3 and GTO and GTC also peeling their way into the pit lane. They will come in when the clock ticks down to 21 minutes remaining, so it's another 4 minutes before those cars can come in, and you can see, yeah, busy enough, isn't it, without having at least, another maybe half a dozen or 10 cars coming in from those particular groups. So driver change occurring there. That is Stephen Walton giving way to Chris Hart, and then the race leaders continue on to what now is lap number 20 for them. Richard Neary leading by 0.7 of a second from Michael Igoe. Now, Richard Neary will give way to son Sam Neary, but they only have 60 seconds to spend stationary in the pit lane. They did not finish in the top 3 in their group GT3 yesterday, so they have no success seconds, whereas the Lamborghini, remember, Michael Igoe giving way to factory Lamborghini driver Phil Keane, an extra 20 seconds to spend in the pits. So that's the kind of deficit that Phil Keane will have to make up. And it may well be, with the bunching up of everybody behind the safety car, that they also get leapfrogged by other cars, because the car that's third in the race, which is Graham Tilley at the wheel of the Nissan, well, he's about 10 seconds adrift, and when he hands over to Will Tregurtha, that Nissan will have to remain stationary for 10 seconds longer than Richard Neary, the race leader, but 10 seconds shorter than Michael Igoe, so he could be right up onto terms. Will Tregurtha coming out of the pit lane with this Lamborghini, who in the hands of Michael Igoe now is looking very, very promising to try and do something to take the lead of the race. Fastest lap again from Michael Igoe, 1 minute 5.536 is a stellar time from Michael Igoe. That now is only a second slower than Phil Keane managed, the pro driver, in that car in yesterday's race. They dive up the inside of Simon Orange's Ginetta. Puff of smoke there from something, not quite sure what that was. Well, that Richard Neary maybe that just sort of locked a brake there, but these GT3 cars have ABS, so you wouldn't have thought so. That's Morgan Tilbrook out of the GT4 Mercedes to hand over to what is Marcus Clutton, and Richard Neary here for the first time, he's having to go really defensive. Michael Igoe has got the bit between his teeth. He's desperate to try and put that WPI Motorsport Lamborghini into the lead of the race before he has to pit. There's a couple of minutes before the pit stop window opens, and now Michael Igoe has drawn himself alongside Richard Neary. He's got the inside line as they head in towards the Robert chicane, and it looks as though the Lamborghini's going to go through to take up the lead of the race. Great driving by Michael Igoe. He looks so racy once the safety car came back into the pit lane, and well, he's taken up the lead of the race. But remember, the Lambo has got an extra 20 seconds to spend in the pit lane relative to the car that he's just taken the lead from. Now, the other thing we don't know is what that Lamborghini has done in terms of tyres over the course of this weekend. We know Richard Neary and Sam Neary are on a set of used slicks, but have WPI Motorsport saved one set of their new tyres for this race, because they only get 3 brand new sets of slick tyres over the course of the weekend, which means that, yeah, tyre management becomes a key as well. In the background, very late into the pit stop window, comes one of the cars. That looked as though that was Fox Motorsport, which is James Townsend, ready to hand over to Ian Duggan. So that's right at the tail end of the pit window for these cars, because once we get down to 21 minutes remaining, then all of the cars from GTB, GTH and GTA need to have at least started their pit stops, and that's the first time at which the GTO and GT3 and GTC cars can come in, which includes this car here, the number 96 car, driven by Chris Kemp, ready to hand over to the pro driver, which is Stuart Hall. Now, Stuart Hall is another driver who just has so much experience, Stuart Hall. He's racing this year in the GT World Challenge with Audi Sport WRT. He's raced at Le Mans before. This is not the driver that's behind the wheel now, but this is going to be Stuart Hall who will take over this car. He's finished 4th overall at Le Mans in the past as Stuart Hall. He's raced in the World Endurance Championship, the European Le Mans Series, the Barcelona 24-hour, it's a bit of historic Formula 1, British GT, British Formula 3. The list just sort of goes on and on and on for Stuart Hall. And he's been a champion in a couple of things in the past as well. Champion in Formula Renault in the Winter Series, and way back, 21 years ago now, rather scary, isn't it? He was champion in a series he had which was called T-Cars, which was another junior category. Likes of, I think Alex Brundle started in that, if memory serves me correctly, T-Cars. So, pit stop window is now open for the cars at the sharp end, so the black Radical could come in at the end of this lap, which would be Steve Burgess to hand to Ben Dimmock. John Dillon, number 61 Lamborghini, could come in to hand over to the pro driver Phil Quaife, and yet into the pit lane they come. So Michael Igoe is in, ready to hand over to Phil Keane. We can also see that Richard Neary is in, ready to hand over to his son Sam Neary. Graham Tilley comes in, ready to hand over to Will Tregurtha. Steve Burgess stays out, so Ben Dimmock's not getting on board just yet. John Dillon is in to hand over to Phil Quaife, and Stuart Proctor is in, ready to hand over to son Lewis Proctor, but they are right the way at pit lane exit end of the pit lane, whereas this car here that had taken up the lead is at pit lane entry end. So Michael Igoe, a quick little chat to Phil Keane, and the door will close on the Lamborghini. They will wait for the clock to tick down, and then the lollipop will be raised, and Phil Keane can get on with it. And if Phil Keane does what we usually expect Phil Keane to do, is that his first flying lap will be the fastest lap of the race. That's the way it tends to work with Phil Keane, who started his career in TVR Tuscans many years ago and finished right at the sharp end of that championship. Phil Keane, I think he was 4th back in Tuscans. He won the 2015 Sunoco Challenge, which came with a prize drive of going out to race in the Rolex 24-hour race at Daytona, and whilst the result wasn't quite what Phil wanted, he hugely impressed the Action Express team, who are a team who've been hugely successful in IMSA sports car racing there over the years. Out of the pit lane comes Sam Neary, because remember, success seconds apply to these cars, so that car had 20 seconds less to spend in the pit lane than the Lamborghini, which only now gets waved out. So pit lane slowly starting to empty of cars, but of course there are some cars that still haven't pitted. So the number 88 Mercedes has conducted its pit stop, the number 18 Lamborghini has conducted its pit stop, but the car that has taken up the lead of the race at this stage is the number 7 Radical RXC of local man Steve Burgess. Lives just down the road at Nottingham. He will hand the car over to former Radical champion. Steve's a multiple Radical champion. We'll hand it also over to Radical Challenge champion Ben Dimmock, who also competed in Mini Challenge a couple of years ago in the open class. So we'll wait for the order to shuffle its way out. That is Warren Gilbert getting out of the car, and the car's owner, which is Jensen Lund, getting on board. It's so good to see Top Cats Racing with us again. They've been a fundamental part of GT Cup racing for so many years, but nice to see a new car as well. They've not quite retired the Marcos Mantis. We've seen Charlotte out in one, they've got the other, but nice to see them running a Lamborghini. Now, this battle here, this is going to be John Whitehouse fighting away with the pro driver now. It was, of course, Craig Wilkins that was on board that Ginetta. It's now going to be Aaron Scott, who is on board the Ginetta, and the car that sits behind the number 90 Balfe Motorsport McLaren, as Aaron Scott squeezes his way up the inside of John Whitehouse and makes his way through. The next of the cars that's going to pick him off is going to be Callum McLeod, who's also a pro driver, plenty of racing experience in sports cars throughout Europe as Callum McLeod. Through he goes and picks up the position. Callum McLeod was a former champion in European Formula 3, was a UK Formula 4 champion as well, and was a champion in Super 1 karting when he was involved in that as well. But sports cars nowadays for Callum McLeod. Number 41 comes in. This is Fraser Smart, about to give way to James Simons. So we've got not that many more minutes, only 2 more minutes before the pit window closes for the rest of the race, and therefore any cars that haven't pitted as yet in GTO, GT3 and GTC need to come in. And we saw Fraser Smart come in to hand over to James Simons. We've also now seen Steve Burgess at the wheel of what was the race-leading Radical, number 7 car, come in to hand over to Ben Dimmock. So I think everybody has either now completed their pit stops or is in the process of completing their pit stops, which means that the order should reassert itself before too much longer, and it should be the number 88 Mercedes that goes back into the lead, which will be Sam Neary. But that car at the moment is showing down in 3rd position, as you can see on the left of your screens there. John Whitehouse with more cars queuing up behind. That's James Kellett that's looking to try and squeeze his way through at the wheel of the Ginetta. Back out of the pit lane comes Ben Dimmock. Now, where is he going to feed back out? He feeds out ahead of what will be Lewis Proctor at the wheel of the McLaren. So doesn't look as though the McLaren gained any ground at all over the Radical there, which is not surprising because both the Radical, the black car there that we're looking at, and the McLaren that sits behind, both had 15 success seconds to spend in the pits. They were both stationary for the same period, i.e. 75 seconds. But Ben Dimmock is a quick driver, but he's an AM, whereas Lewis Proctor is a pro. He raced in British GT Championship last year and is surely probably going to certainly apply some pressure to Ben Dimmock. Whether he can pick his way through or not remains to be seen. It's a Group GTO Radical, it's a Group GT3 McLaren, and neither of these cars we've seen race in the GT Cup Championship before. We've not had a Radical RXC on the grid before. We've not had a 750S GT3 McLaren before, and Lewis Proctor picks off Ben Dimmock. They both squeeze their way through and past ex-Le Mans winner Darren Turner at the wheel of the Feathers Motorsport Group GTH car, who stays harmlessly out of the way, and rightly so, because that car, the number 82 Aston Martin, does lead Group GTH at the moment for the GT4 homologated cars. Ultra Gertha pressing on at the wheel of the Nissan. Got a bit of traffic that he's going to have to work his way through and past, which is going to be Patrick Collins. Dives up the inside of the Orange Racing powered by JMH Ginetta as they head up towards McLean's Corner. And the next of the cars that Ultra Gertha is going to want to try and attack is going to be Phil Quaife, that is just up the road at the wheel of the Lamborghini that he's taken over from John Dillon. Now, as I said yesterday, the difficulty is that when the pro drivers get on board for part 2 of the race, all of the pro drivers, by very nature that they are professional drivers, are all so evenly matched. So it means that your ability to catch the car ahead or capitalise on a mistake is pretty much minimal, because all the pro drivers have a very similar pace and just don't make mistakes. But of course, the way the cars are set up in the race is that the car is usually set up towards the amateur driver, so the amateur driver is happy with the handling of the car, and if the pro driver might not be quite what they want, but they are pro drivers, they can drive around that problem and still be quick. So Will Tregurtha is going to have his work cut out here if he wants to try and catch the Lamborghini that lies ahead. James Kellett still trying to pick off the car that lies ahead of him, which is going to be Callum McLeod. The Group GTA Ginetta just goes ahead of the Group GTH McLaren. So that is down through the order. That is something like 22nd position there, looking to try and work his way through. Over the start-finish line comes John Whitehouse at the wheel of the number 44 McLaren. That's the championship winning car from 2019. Chris Hart at the wheel of Group GTA Ginetta, coming under pressure from Mo Ritson. Nice to see Mo in the championship, another new driver for this season. Mo Ritson raced in European GT4 sporadically. We saw him race in the Junior Saloon Car Championship a few years ago as well, another one of the junior categories that we have. And a slight mistake there for John Ruston, almost smacked a brake there on the McLaren, so through went Chris Hart. That slows the McLaren coming out of the old hairpin, and he might lose a further place if he's not careful. Now we've got a few cars being forewarned with regards to track limits. A flash of the lights for Sam Neary, who is classified as a pro sporting driver, which means that he is not eligible to start the pit stop races, but he is eligible to get involved and race in one of the 2 sprint races over the weekend and one of the 2 qualifying sessions. It's a new category that's been introduced for this year, as I mentioned earlier on, and Sam is going well. He leads the race. The relative gap back to Phil Keane, who's in 2nd place. Well, remember, there was a 20-second deficit that Phil Keane was always going to have to make up because of the additional time they would spend in the pits. Well, 18.5 seconds is the gap, as you can see on your screens there, between Phil Keane and Sam Neary, 1st and 2nd in this race. 5-second penalty is being awarded to the number 44 car. That is John Whitehouse, I'm afraid to say, the car that runs 9th in Group GTH, the former champions, himself and Steve Ruston, that share that car. Track limits, so an extra 5 seconds will be applied to their time once we get to the end of the race, and that will drop them very sadly down through the order. So Marcus Clutton about to be gobbled up at the wheel of the Enduro Racing Mercedes. There goes the number 34 car that's in the hands of Sam Randon now. That's the Group GTB leading car, sits 15th overall in the standings, but leads its group, more importantly. It's at 14th in its standings because it's got past the number 77 car of Adam Carroll on that lap. Adam driving one of the GT4 Greystone GT McLarens. In fact, Adam Carroll and Ollie Webb together on the circuit, the 2 cars. In fact, it's Ollie Webb that was overtaken by Sam Randon on that lap. Side by side, the 2 Ginettas absolutely together for 3rd and 4th in the group, for 21st and 22nd overall. And that is going to be, I think it's Ian Duggan, isn't it, that's now behind the wheel of that Fox Motorsport car. Fighting away with James Kellett. Ian Duggan, who raced in the Ginetta GT5 Championship last year, whereas the AM class champion, under pressure from the 2 times overall champion in the Ginetta GT5 category, James Kellett. Can James Kellett work his way through? The door is open, he's going to have a go. Our prizes it open, and Ian Duggan, just lets him go in the end, probably knowing that the inevitable was going to happen. You've got the pro driver bearing down on you. You want to try and push as hard as you can, but equally as much, you've got a championship to think about. Consistency is what brings championships, and now that he's lost the place, the next thing he'll be doing is watching his mirrors, because the fight for 3rd and 4th is on him as Will Tregurtha takes the opportunity to get himself alongside Phil Quaife. The Nissan's going to go through this time. Through, is it? Yep, through goes Will Tregurtha. Gains the place over Phil Quaife at the wheel of the Lamborghini that he's taken over from John Dillon, so that's a true change for order there. Will Tregurtha, former runner-up in the European GT4 Championship, was the British GT4 champion with Stuart Middleton back in 2017, but he's able to gain the place there over Phil Quaife. Phil Quaife does a chunk of historic racing nowadays as well, so fastest lap coming up for, it says Stuart Proctor there, but it'll be Lewis Proctor at this stage of the race. So last lap was done by Lewis Proctor in 5th position. 1 minute 5.233 from Lewis Proctor, taking over the car from his father. We've now got less than 9 minutes to go. And as for our group leaders, well, Lewis Proctor briefly having the fastest lap of the race. Sam Neary now goes quicker. 1 minute 4.892 from Sam Neary. 1 minute 4.892. That's still about 0.3 of a second slower than the fastest lap we saw from yesterday's pit stop race, but that's hugely impressive from Sam, because remember, they are on used tyres, not a brand new set of tyres. The two Greystone GT cars squabbling away together. This is Ollie Webb fighting away with Adam Carroll, and they've also got quicker cars bearing down on them as well as they try and thrust their way through the order, down through the Craner curves. So that will briefly stop the squabble of the two McLarens as the two Lamborghinis go through, the first of which is Chris Hall, the next of which is the car that's third overall in the race. Chris Hall at the wheel of the 96 car is lying down in 17th position, but of course the number 18 Lamborghini, which has looking to try and go through and ahead of it, is running second overall in the race in the hands of Phil Keane. So this is a Super Trofeo car that lies ahead of a GT3 car. So let's just have a quick look. The GT3 has better aero, but in a straight line. The Lambo, which is a Alaria car to drive, actually has a slightly better opportunity to have the grunt in a straight line, but Phil Keane dives his way through and works his way through. The Lamborghini factory driver now through and placing a lap on the car that he was doing battle with, whilst those two Greystone GT McLarens still continuing. Great to see Greystone with us. What they've done is bring 3 amateur drivers off high-performance track days into racing. 3 cars this weekend and partnered them all up with some very, very professional, very successful drivers. We've got plenty of McLarens in Group GTH this year. This is John Whitehouse, who, remember, has got that time penalty, coming under pressure from Mo Ritson. Mo Ritson, who is making his debut weekend in the GT Cup Championship, again has been hugely impressive. Has had great pace, the 18-year-old from Leeds, at the wheel of his Track Promotions 570S McLaren. Another new team for this year, Track Promotions. That's the team that was set up by Martin Plowman and Kelvin Fletcher, the former Strictly Come Dancing champion. And good to see them sort of involved in this category as well, in for the season, I'm led to believe. Now, Paul Bailey was driving that Ferrari earlier, wasn't he? That has now been taken over by Ross Wiley. Where does it sit in the standings? Well, it is 7th overall, the Ferrari, which puts it 2nd in Group GTO. As Phil Keane dives at the inside of Marcus Clutton's GT4 Mercedes. Let me just guide you through our class leaders at this stage with 6.5 minutes to go. Leading the race overall and therefore leading GT3 is number 88, which is Sam Neary. We have down in 6th position the number 7 Radical RXC, which is going to be Ben Dimmock, who is leading Group GTO at this stage. 8th position is the number 9 Lamborghini. That is Jensen Lunn, who leads Group GTC. In 9th place is the Group GTA leading car, which is going to be Simon Orange, the reigning champion. In 10th place is the Group GTH leading car, number 82. Now that's the Aston Martin that's now safely in the hands of long-time Aston Martin factory driver and Le Mans winner, Darren Turner, who's raced in everything, British Touring Car Championship. He was ex-McLaren test driver in Formula One. We've seen him racing in DTM in the past as well. So huge amounts of experience there. And then down in 14th position, that's the Group GTB leader, which is Sam Randon at the wheel of the Porsche. So those are your group leaders. Stop-go penalty for car number 50 for the pit stop being 2 seconds too short. Now that was when Carl Cavers gave the Porsche Cayman GT4 over to Lewis Plato, the pro driver who's behind the wheel. The car is running, 14th now, and it's coming, I think, this time through. Yeah, it's coming this time through to serve that stop-go penalty. It sounds rather draconian, doesn't it? The fact that you are short by 2 seconds in the pit stop and therefore you're then given a drive-through penalty. We know it takes 15 seconds to drive down the pit lane at the speed limit. But then, of course, you have to decelerate from that down to 0, stop for 2 seconds, and then accelerate up. So you lose the best part of 25, maybe 30 seconds. So that is really going to undo all of the hard work that Carl Cavers and Lewis Plato have done. As again, Sam Neary's working his way through the traffic. That is now the car in 6th position that's been placed a lap down. That's the Group GTO leading Radical that lost out there. in the hands of Ben Dimmock, as Sam Neary shows no mercy, lapping everybody up to and now including 6th place with 4.5 minutes to go. What we're looking at now is the 3rd and 4th in Group GTH. Now that is Ollie Webb, former European Le Mans Series champion, coming under pressure from Bradley Ellis, who is a former British GT champion. The pros are so evenly matched. Bradley a little bit quicker, just coming out of the Robert chicane, almost draws himself alongside Ollie Webb, but Ollie Webb's got the all-important inside line as they head up towards Redgate Corner. The nose of the Aston Martin dips as Bradley Ellis takes a wider sweep in towards Redgate to try and cut back on the exit of the corner and get the run onto the top of Hollywood over Ollie Webb, who tries to squeeze him as much as he can. Bradley will not be lifting off at this stage, absolutely rest assured, and they then head downhill in towards the old hairpin, and Ollie Webb just gets the car positioned to make it pretty much impossible for the number 15 Aston Martin to work its way through. So it's the Greystone GT McLaren in the hands of Ollie Webb, having a great battle with the number 15 Aston Martin that sits behind. Now, can he unlock the door to try and squeeze his way through? The Century Motorsport Aston Martin for the moment is just shadowing the McLaren that lies ahead. They both run in the same category. They're both GT4 cars, and this time Bradley Ellis is on the correct side of the circuit. Here's to, as far as Ollie Webb is concerned, here's to driver's right and has the inside line for the Robert chicane. So through he goes. Bradley Ellis picks up what will be 14th position. Down to 15th goes Ollie Webb, and bearing down on them is Lewis Proctor at the wheel of the McLaren 750 GT3, which is running in 5th position overall. Places a lap on both of them. 2.5 minutes to go. Phil Keane, remember, stopped for an extra 20 seconds relative to Sam Neary, who leads the race. What's the gap between the pair of them? 20.4 seconds at this stage. 10-second additional time penalty now for number 44, which is the Steve Rust and John Whitehouse McLaren. They were given a 5-second penalty for track limits. Well, clearly the warning wasn't heeded. That now becomes a 10-second penalty for track limits, going beyond the circuit limits. And we also see now a time penalty going out for number 7, I'm afraid, which is the Steve Burgess Ben Dimmock Radical RXC GT3 that runs in the GTO category, if that makes sense. So a couple of minutes to go. Looking at Will Tregurtha here, coming under pressure from the Lamborghini that lies behind, but Will has had a good old run. I've got to say, I've been hugely impressed with the pace of the Nissan generally over the course of this weekend, because in the first race that we had, the number 4 Nissan finished 3rd overall in the race. In the pit stop race yesterday, it finished 4th overall, but still 3rd in the GT3 category. That's exactly what it did in the sprint race today as well, finished 3rd overall and therefore 3rd in its category, and it looks like it's on for another 3rd again. So each time it's finished in 3rd position in GT3 and has had, 3 third places and a 4th if they stay where they are for the next minute or so. Over the start-finish line comes Phil Keane. This time it is a lap that's put on Josh Jackson at the wheel of that fantastic-looking McLaren. It looks good, doesn't it, in orange, and a very dark blue. It almost looks black on the cameras, but it's a very deep metallic blue of that car. Our race leader, though, is just heading up towards McLean's Corner for what will be the penultimate time. Aaron Scott at the wheel of the Scott Sport Prepared, his own team that prepare that car for Craig Wilkins. And they've been a long-time driver partnership, actually, Aaron Scott and Craig Wilkins, racing in the UK and in Europe, has just been gobbled up by our race leader. And now there's just one more lap to go between Sam Neary, his father Richard Neary, Team ABBA Racing, and yet another win for the Mercedes AMG GT3. We've got a car in the gravel there at the Robert chicane, which is not in the safest of places. Now, I have a feeling I know which one it was. Yeah, it's the number 17 car. I thought it looked like it, and that, I'm afraid to say, is Patrick Collins. They've had a difficult day, really, with the oil cooler problems earlier on, scuppering their race. And now Patrick Collins and Russ Lindsay are going to see another retirement for the Orange Racing, powered by JMH Automotive Ginetta G55. Sam Neary, though, with the clock about to tick to 0 for the final time, works his way out of the old hairpin. He enjoys a 17.5 second lead over Phil Keane, who's got 10 seconds in hand over this Nissan that's just coming up towards Redgate Corner now. So the top 3 certainly looking as though they are settled at this stage. There's still a bit of traffic for Will Tregurtha to deal with, and I think that's Jensen Lund's car that is the leader of Group GTC in 8th position that he's going to want to try and pick his way past on this final lap. But out of Coppice for the final time. One more little bit of traffic that he needs to deal with, which is Ollie Webb's GT4 McLaren. Ollie lying 4th in Group GTH, himself and Ian Campbell in this race. But for the final time, out of Redgate Corner comes Sam Neary, and the Team ABBA Racing Mercedes, himself and his father Richard Neary, claim yet another victory. They won 2 sprint races and one of the pit stop races over the course of this weekend. That of course now means they will carry a 20-second success penalty if they appear at Brands Hatch on the 1st of May for the next championship race that will take place. Through comes the number 18 Lamborghini of Michael Igoe and Phil Keane. Phil Keane bringing it to the checkered flag. They will finish in 2nd place. And this car here, started by Graham Tilley, brought towards a checkered flag by the former British GT4 champion Will Tregurtha, and the big Nissan known as Godzilla. The car comes through to finish in what will be 3rd position. 4th place, we should see, it's already through, the number 61 Lamborghini of John Dillon and Phil Quaith. 5th place should be the McLaren of Stuart and Lewis Proctor. That should appear out of the Robert Chicane any second now. Andy Roby's Marcos Mantis comes through first though, but we will see that McLaren come through and finish. Here it comes in what will be 5th position over the start finish line, and that means that the top 5 cars were all GT3 cars. In 6th place will be the first non-GT3 car, which will be Steve Burgess and Ben Dimmock at the wheel of their Group GTO Radical RXC. But what a racing weekend, what a start to the season for the GT Cup Championship. A record 38 cars on the grid for Donington Park. We've never had 38 cars as an entry list here at Donington Park before. It doesn't break the all-time record because you have to look way back to, I think, 2009 when the GT Cup Championship supported A1GP, which was known as the World Cup of Motorsport, where all of the nations entered cars, and it was a support race for that very last ever race there was for A1GP before the series folded, and there was 40 plus cars on the grid for that one. And guess what, we go to Brands Hatch on the Grand Prix circuit next. We've got a capacity grid of cars, and I think it's either 4, 5 or 6 reserves on the list for that one, so there's going to be, if memory serves me correctly, I think it's 44 cars is the maximum you can start on the Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit, which means that, yes, it's going to be even more critical, isn't it, that we have that splitting of the pit stops come the pit stop races over the weekend. So cars being pushed back into their garages. We are hoping to grab a quick word with some of them. Marcus Clutton has stopped on the slowdown lap by the look of things, so not all has gone well with the Enduro Racing Mercedes, which has come to a halt. That looks like at Schwantz Curve, possibly, on the run up towards McLean's Corner. So that car will not see the checkered flag, or has seen the checkered flag, but has stopped on the slowdown lap. It will be classified, however, 12th overall and 2nd in Group GTH. So with the cars heading in towards the pit lane, we might just be able to guide you through some of the results. We'll certainly pick out the top 10, and then we'll head towards whoever the group winners are. The win, and therefore the win in Group GT3, goes the way of Team ABBA Racing, Sam and Richard Neary. 2nd was WPI Motorsport, which was Michael Igoe and Phil Keane. And 3rd place went the way of Graham Tilley and Will Tregurtha in their Nissan. 4th place was the Scott Sport Lamborghini of John Dillon and Phil Quaith. And 5th went the way of Balf Motorsport pairing of father and son Stuart and Lewis Proctor, with the top 6 being completed by the winner in Group GTO, the Radical RXC of Steve Burgess and Ben Dimmock. 7th place was the Ferrari of SB Engineering, Paul Bailey and Ross Wiley. 8th place was the winner of Group GTC, which is going to be Warren Gilbert and Jensen Lund for Top Cats Racing. 9th place was Stanbridge Motorsport with their Lamborghini, and completing the top 10 is the winner of Group GTA, the number 67 car, which is Jason Orange. The other cars that won their groups that were outside of the top 10, well, the Feathers Motorsport car of James Guess and Darren Turner was the winner of Group GTH in 11th place. In 13th place, Richard Marsh and Sam Randon won Group GTB at the wheel of the number 34 Porsche. And those will be the last of our group winners in what has been a busy, busy day here at Donington Park. You can see the rest of the results all the way down to the bottom of the top 20. And hopefully we should be able to hand you downstairs very shortly to Michelle, who might be able to have a chat to one or two of the drivers. But problems for some in the pit lane, delight for others, and hopefully a few to chat to down there with Michelle Livings in the pit lane.
Hello, yes, thanks so much, Mark, for some fantastic commentary there. I am here in the pit lane, right by our GTC group winner that has just come in. Very, very proud, the people in this garage. There was a lot of cheering. They're just moving the car back now. Whoa. In a moment, I'll see if I can dive in and have a chat to our driver, but they're just doing a little bit of manoeuvring at the moment. A lot of choreography going on here in the garages. Maybe I won't be speaking to him. We'll have a look. So what's going on? Here we go. There we go. I think I might be able to jump in a minute. I think they're repositioning just for me. So, of course, what we'll have for you very soon is a one-day race next time. We're going to be heading to Brands, which is going to be fantastic. Always a pleasure to roll into the Grand Prix circuit at Brands. It is a one-day event only, so it will be 2 rounds of racing that we'll have for you next time. That's happening on the 1st of May. So we're looking forward to that. It's only 3 weeks to wait. Let's jump in and see if we can have a quick chat now. Jensen Lunn getting out of the car. Shall I worm my way in? I'll stick my microphone in. Congratulations, I'm going to butt in there. Fantastic result for you.
Thank you.
How was it?
Really tough. We had a mechanical problem in the second half of the race.
Yeah.
So I had to nurse the car, and it's a balance between, P2 was catching, how fast do I go, how much do I push it. Obviously didn't want to crash, so they were counting the laps down, counting the seconds, and I had to push for 2 laps. But we got it. So
yeah, fantastic. Well, you've got a lot of very happy people here.
Yeah.
You've got a big smile on your face.
It was a challenging race for different reasons, but great, really happy.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations. Well done. I'll let you get yourself calmed down after that. A brilliant result for them. So that was Jensen Lunn then. Not sure if there's anybody around yet that we can speak to. So I'm just going to, I think I'll do a sign off actually, and say thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this weekend's racing. And don't forget that you can keep up to date with everything to do with GT Cup. Plenty of places to do that. There's the official Instagram page. You've got Facebook, of course, we're doing the Facebook Lives. And don't forget, if you want to watch any of the previous races, not just from this weekend, but from other seasons, do head over to the YouTube channel because you'll find it all there. But I have to say, it's been a fantastic first weekend of racing in the 2021 GT Cup Championship. I hope you've enjoyed it. Remember, 3 weeks' time, we'll see you at Brands Hatch. Take care.